All right. So let's get started.
Yeah, Omar, I think let's get started.
Sure. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. My name is Omar Tubar. I'm a third-year medical student at McGill University and the co-moderator for tonight's event presented by the CCS Networking Committee, CaRMS Interview Tips and Advice for Canadian Medical Students.
And good evening, guys. My name is Ming. I'm a final year medical student at McMaster University, and I'm also a co-moderator with Omar tonight. Thank you all for taking the time to attend this event, and we really hope it is going to be a great educational experience for you guys. Just a brief schedule for this event. The first half hour of tonight will be a panel discussion where we'll ask various questions to our esteemed panelists, and then we'll transition to smaller groups with the panelists as well as various other experts for the latter hour. Just a quick note on Remo in case you guys haven't used it. To join a table for the second hour of the discussion, just double click on a table. But just so you're aware, there will be a maximum of 6 people per table.
All right. So, our guest speakers for tonight are our colleague and member of the CCS Networking Committee, Dr. Nigar Atifi, an internal med resident at UBC, and Dr. Peter Vo, who's a cardiac surgeon who's currently completing his first year of fellowship at Cleveland Clinic after completing his residency at the Ottawa Heart Institute.
As for our other panelists, we have Dr. Christine Herman, who is a Royal College certified in the specialties of both cardiac and vascular surgery. She's currently practicing in Dalhousie University, having completed her residency there as well. She is currently the research director for the Division of Cardiac Surgery at Dalhousie University as well. And last but certainly not least is Dr. Clarence Koo. Dr. Koo is a cardiac electrophysiologist practicing out of St. Boniface Hospital in Winnipeg after completing his internal medicine residency at the University of Toronto before continuing his cardiology and electrophysiology training at UBC. Currently, he is the associate program director for the postgraduate cardiology training program.
All right. So, without further ado, let's start our first question, Dr. Atifi. So, just a kind reminder to all our panelists, you would have to turn on your camera in order for you to appear on the screen. Thank you very much, Nigar. So, the first question for you: how would you recommend students prepare for their interviews?
Um, for sure. And thank you so much for having me today. Well, I just did my CARMS this past cycle. So I was a graduate from University of Manitoba, actually, and in 2023. So the way we experience CARMS might be a little bit different from what you guys will be experiencing this year. In the coming weeks and in the years to come, hopefully you guys don't have to go through another COVID. But I'll just give you what I found very helpful for myself from the advices I got from other mentors that I had. So the first thing is to make sure that you know your CV ins and out. There are questions that might come up from your CV that you've submitted to schools that you might not expect. It doesn't matter if it's from the research part, education part, the gaps, the personal interest, the presentations, anything, any question can come up. And personally, for me, the parts that were like unique and like more niche came up way more than like the scientific and presentation and research aspects of my CV. The other thing that I will highly recommend is that make sure that you have a kind of brand for yourself, like know what kind of aspects of your personal experience is the boldest and makes you like distinguishable from other people. For example, for me, I knew that what made me different from other people was in some aspects was that I was very interested in uh, EDI in terms of immigrant medical student experience or global health. I had a very like a lot of experience in that. So find something that is unique about you and your experience and try to label it and make sure that you bring that up. And then something that I recommend for preparing is that I guess because this is a CCS event and a lot of you guys have a lot of experience in cardiology, those of you who are applying to internal medicine, at least try to make sure that you have a well-rounded knowledge of what internal medicine is aside from cardiology, and have some kind of explanation about what about cardiology makes you interested in internal medicine in general, and be prepared to be prepared to say why cardiology and what about cardiology you love that you can apply to other parts of internal medicine, and try to love that parts as well, and even like consider in the future, because internal medicine people love to know that you're also interested in all parts of the specialty. I'm not sure how many minutes I have, but I can answer this question in more detail in the breakout session.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Nigar. Next question is for Dr. Vo.
Hey there.
Hey,
Thanks for
Peter.
having me.
Thank you for joining us tonight. So the next question is, do you have any tips for applicants approaching interview day?
Sure. Yeah. For me, when I was going through the process, I did a few things. Number one, practice, practice, practice. Either with yourself, in the mirror, in the shower, wherever you're most comfortable, or with a friend. They don't have to necessarily be in medicine. It's just more so getting comfortable about speaking about yourself and your experiences, so that when you're doing it with your interview panel, it's not for the first time, and it's a bit more smooth, and you get more comfortable with that aspect. The other thing I think is really helpful is actually sitting down and reviewing your CV. I know for some of you guys, these CVs can be pretty long, and sometimes you may get caught off guard from your interview panel asking you a question about something that you may not have thought was a big deal, but your panel maybe thought was interesting. And so really knowing about your experiences kind of in and out. Sometimes, it's been a while since you've, either remember publishing on one thing, or even an extracurricular in which you were looking leading a group or something like that, you may not remember as well. So just sitting down and reviewing those things. And another thing I recommend to applicants is to kind of categorize your experiences almost into different CANMEDS roles. Even a lot of interviewers will ask questions based on the things like leadership or communication, problem solving, that kind of thing. And under each one of these things, you can think of probably an experience, whether clinical or non-clinical, that you can put under this umbrella of kind of experiences. That way, when you get a question, you can kind of instantly draw from one of these things. Or you can do it in reverse, just put down whatever experience that was really meaningful to you, and classify, was this a test of my leadership? Was this a test of my problem solving? That kind of thing. And that kind of helps you have this solid list of things that you can draw from when you get asked a question in a variety of things. And then I think there's a lot of resources out there. I think if you just even type in Google, and I know there's databases or data banks of old questions that people have may encountered that not necessarily may apply to your specialty, but just in general, you want to be able to answer things like, tell me about yourself. That shouldn't come as a surprise. And then, why you want to do your specialty, that kind of thing. I think in general, if you cover those things, you should be able to get through the interview.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Peter. So off to you, Ming.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much to everyone so far. Our next question will go to Dr. Christine Herman. Hi, Dr. Herman. Thank you for having me here today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So our question to you is, obviously, during these interview times, it'll be a stressful environment for a lot of the interviewees. Do you have any tips on how to approach a question where an interviewee may not know the answer to, or may throw them off?
Well, that's of course you gave me the toughest question of the ones you sent us. I tell my residents when we're practicing for Royal College exams, firstly, to pause before every single question, whether you know it or not, because like Peter said, you're going to practice, practice, practice. So there's going to be some questions you're really going to know well, but it's always good to pause just for a second or two. And then when you don't know the answer, you're going to naturally pause. And if you haven't done that all along, it feels really uncomfortable and you kind of panic. So now you've inserted a pause. The interviewers know you're going to pause. And so that gives you some time to process kind of the question, decide whether you want to ask them to repeat it or for clarification. And if you really don't know, that's a little bit of time to that's a way to give yourself a little bit more time to think about the question if you could ask them to repeat it or explain further. It also depends on like what kind of question that you're getting. So if you can't answer, tell me something about yourself or what your biggest strength or weakness is. Like Peter said, these are pretty like standard bread and butter questions that you should know. And the only way to get through that is to practice saying these questions out loud. In terms of clinical scenarios, I feel like that might be one where people are going to get caught up on. You know, in Halifax, we always have some clinical scenarios, and there's always maybe an ethics question. And if you don't know how to manage AFib, that's okay. Say what you know, and then just go back to your basic principles of being a good person, a good medical student, about being safe and being humble. So, you know, this now has exceeded my level of knowledge, so I'm going to reach out to my senior resident on call or my staff on call, or I'm going to go take some time to read about it, et cetera, et cetera. And the ethics questions, you know, the interviewers are looking for you to pick a side, and if the side is gray, or if the question is gray, they're asking you to kind of to talk about it. So you're going to have to kind of just jump in and pick an answer. And again, just go with what you think is going to be best for the patient and what the safest thing is. And so I think a lot of the questions now are standardized. And so there's less of this, there's less of these wacky questions. Like in my time, I was asked, some people were asked if they knew how to change a tire. And, you know, that's kind of a bizarre question to ask. I think they're a lot more standardized. And so I think you're going to get less of those ones that really kind of are off-putting. The one I do want to mention briefly to finish is not all questions are trauma informed. And so if you have trauma, recent trauma or any kind of trauma, and, you know, these questions come up about what's the biggest obstacle you've had to overcome or something along those nature, you should kind of think about that ahead of time and what kind of answer you're going to take so you don't get caught off guard. And if you want to know how to answer those questions, I can explain more in the breakout sessions.
That was very insightful and thorough. Thank you very much, Dr. Herman. And to Dr. Koo, we have a question for you as well.
Yeah.
Good evening, Dr. Koo. Hope you're doing well. So our question for you is, you know, are there any specific qualities or experiences that are often overlooked by applicants, but are actually highly valued by interviewers?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I just wanted to sort of just echo what everyone else has said already to date. It's really important to actually know your CV well and to know things that are actually encapsulated within your CV. Interviewers will have actually reviewed your CV with exceptional depth and will actually have picked up things within your CV, experiences of things that they might, for example, say, well, this would be a really interesting marker of leadership, or this would have been a really interesting marker of teaching capabilities. And it's always then surprising then when you actually, you know, ask an interviewee, tell us about your leadership skills. And you're like, oh, wow, I wish they would have talked about their Model UN experience, and they don't mention anything about it. You're like, oh, that's so weird. Right. And so I would say that, you know, really know your CV well, know what in your CV potentially could make you stand out compared to other individuals. Think about the way these experiences have actually been formative for you, that have actually made you the person that you are, that have made you, you know, an excellent medical student, an excellent future clinician, exceptional cardiac clinician of some sort, and then be able then to translate that into a worthwhile answer when provided with the option to do that. And it doesn't necessarily have to apply to anything, to all things academic. So I would have to say then that there are certain, you have to remember that even on your CV, there's a section that often people will put down for hobbies and interests. And I will say that after interviewing your 15th to 25th interviewee, you actually want people to actually stand out from everyone else. And sometimes it's things in the hobbies and interests that will actually make individuals stand out. We had one interviewee, I remember the last year, for example, one of his interests was surfing. And when we actually asked him how he dealt with stress, he actually brought up the whole thing about surfing. He was like, well, sometimes when you're faced with an amazingly huge wave, you end up going into the zone and you don't think of anything but the wave. And you just ride the wave and you're just in the zone. He goes, well, there are times when I'm on call when I just remember about surfing. I just get into the zone, take a few deep breaths, and I treat it like a wave. And it's one of those things where, it might sound kind of corny and silly, but afterwards we're like, wow, that was a great answer. And so I don't know, that was a bit of a rambling answer, but my sense is that there's something about every single one of you that makes you unique, that makes you different. Your experiences, of course, are not cookie cutter across everyone. So, when it comes down to coming up with memorable answers, I mean, don't just rely on the cookie cutter answers, really point out things that do make you different and unique from others.
Absolutely. I think that is super valuable advice and not rambling at all. So thank you very much. Omar, I'll pass the plate back to you.
Thank you, Ming. All right. So, Nagar, the next question is for you. Okay. So, what kind of questions should applicants be expecting at the interview?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess the first question that pretty much comes in every single interview is like, tell me about yourself. Try to have a practice answer for this, but at the same time, don't memorize it so that it comes in as naturally. It doesn't look like that you're like just rehearsing yourself. But be prepared to answer this question. Other questions about in the personal questions category would be things that you can tell about yourself to the examiners that they cannot find in any of your submitted files, like something just outside of everything that you've submitted that they should know about you. Obviously, there is the questions about like specific details of your CV, and it can be from anything. Like I got a question about like reading philosophical books and like what school of philosophy I'm into, and we had a discussion about that. And there are situational questions that you have to answer about like what would you do in this scenario with like conflicts, blah blah blah, like the very routine ones. And then there's also ethical questions that might come up. And then there's also questions that they want to know about your amount of knowledge about the healthcare system as a whole, and also about this specialty that you're applying to. How much do you know about the pros and cons of the specialty, and how much you're prepared for that? How much insight do you have into what you're getting yourself into? And you have to make sure that you also mention the cons of every specialty, because it would be too narrow-minded to say, oh, there's only positive things about this. And then some, if in case of you guys, I think because you will have done rotations in some schools that you will get interviews, that you're probably going to be asked questions about what did you like about this rotation, what did you not like, what was your experience, what was your takeaway, why did you choose this rotation out of like all the other rotations, etc. And I think another very important question is why you are applying to that school specifically. If you're going out of province, why that school, why that city? So make sure that you know everything about that program that you can find, like doing a good research online, going to the town halls. That gives you a good grasp of what each program is about. and what is their niche, what is their like type of residence that they look for. And you might also get asked some questions about your electives. Why did you choose these electives? If there's like a huge switch from one subspecialty to another, be prepared to answer that question.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your answer, Nigar. Next up is Peter. All right. So the next question is a bit of a serious one, right? So what if an applicant does not match the first round?
Yeah, that is a serious and dark question. It's a tough one for me to answer as I haven't been in those shoes. Obviously, I failed in other areas, but I think not matching is a pretty devastating thing for someone. I have a lot of close friends who went through the process, and really I'm just speaking from secondhand experience and from previous applicants that I've known as well. I would say that the CaRMS process itself is a very tough process. It's tough on the applicant, and it some years for particular specialties, it's not even a reflection on the applicant and more so the circumstances. And competition can really bring out, I think, some not the best in people, but also the worst when things don't go well. I would say. So I think first things first is take a deep breath and take the initial period, obviously, to kind of understand what's going on, and reach out to your friends, reach out to people you trust, people who are close to you, talk to them, and get a sense of maybe where things could have went wrong, and also reflect maybe it was an extremely competitive year, and so first really is to take some time to reflect, take some time to mourn, and then really then the next step is deciding what is next and what are your options. And so that's part of the reflection as well, is figuring out, is this really what I want to do, or is there something else that I want to do as well? And so I'll speak on in terms of cardiac surgery, for example. If you wanted to apply again, then there's either going to be spots in the second round, which isn't very often, but sometimes there is, or you think about applying the following year. And if you're going to do that, then you have to think about, okay, so what can put me in a better spot for the following year? And there's going to be people in different circumstances as well. Not everyone in our audience is going to be a Canadian, a CMG. You may also be an IMG who is applying for one of the very few spots in cardiac surgery. So figuring out, is there going to be a spot available, and then if so, what can I do to strengthen my application? Can I do more electives? Can I do more research? Can I pursue an advanced degree? Those are all options, and I think the options are very much going to depend on what circumstance you're in. And then the other side is, are you going to be happy doing something else? And that's honestly a really hard question to answer. One thing that can help you is, again, talking to people you trust, people who you think know you, and getting their opinion. Talk to people who you met on the tour, talk to people who you've done electives with, obviously talk to your mentors, family members, and kind of get an idea. And then pretty quickly, I think you'll find that CaRMS will release, what positions are available in the second round. And so in the second round, there's going to be a lot of options, whether you want to pursue something that is other cardiovascular medicine related. So maybe they're vascular surgery, you may be interested in that, or maybe you just want to do surgery in general. So there may be some general surgery spots, or maybe you're interested more in the heart and then you want to take the internal medicine path and eventually do cardiology or interventional cardiology, electrophysiology. this is, for some people a blessing in disguise, because then it really gets them to think about other options. But I think this answer is going to be a little bit different for everybody, and it just takes it's going to be a punch in the gut, I think, no matter who you are. But I think a little humility goes a long way, and having a good support group, reaching out to people, and you're going to realize that, you have a lot of friends who will really go the extra mile for you, and try to get you in the spot where, you want to be. And I do really believe that we all end up kind of doing eventually something that, one of the many things that we can really make a difference in other people's lives, but also bring fulfillment to ours. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the insight. Thank you, Peter. Off to you, Ming.
Thank you very much, Omar. And so the next question is to Dr. Herman. Hi, Dr. Herman. And so a question for you is, on standing on the other side of the interview table, what, in your opinion, makes a candidate stand out during their interviews?
I think a lot of great things have already been mentioned. I really like the other panelists' comment about, something really unique on your CV. Especially, I feel like in internal medicine, they're interviewing like over 100 people, right? So you really want to stand out. And so having something really unique like surfing or whatever is really going to set you apart. And when we're talking about people, they might be like, who you're talking about? And you're like, the guy that went surfing. And you're like, oh yes, I really like that guy. So sometimes that can really kind of set you apart from everybody else. Personally, I really look for someone who's insightful about themselves, and that can really show in some of the clinical scenarios, the ethical scenarios, insightful about what you don't know, because like no one expects you to know everything, and I actually feel uncomfortable. Like sometimes the medical students will answer clinical scenarios where they don't call for help, and that actually when the patient's clinical scenario is escalating, and that actually makes me kind of uncomfortable as an interviewer that they didn't automatically get there, because that's what the question is pretty much designed for. And then humility, you need to be humble as well. So that kind of is the same vein, like, this is what I know, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm not good at. I really kind of like that in an applicant. I think people who really stand out have really great, concise answers. They don't fumble and mumble around. And the only way that you can really get through that is to practice and have a loved one ask you questions. It doesn't matter what you're saying, just to get the words out loud and to hear what you're saying before you go and say it in front of me. Like, I shouldn't be the first person you're practicing some of these questions out loud in front of. And so when I see someone who's poised and calm and answering the questions in a nice fluid way, that really also stands out. I don't know. They used to say to wear a colorful tie. I don't know if that's still true to me, or wear colorful clothing to help yourself be remembered. The other thing, of course, is know the program that you're interviewing with, and make sure you ask a question and make it, a good question. I feel like when people don't ask questions about my program, I kind of question whether they actually really want to come here, because it doesn't feel like they're interested. So I think that's another kind of no-brainer for everyone to do. I think that just about covers it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Those are some amazing tips. And so for our final question for the panel portion of this session is to Dr. Koo. And so Dr. Koo, we were wondering if you could speak on and provide some examples of things that candidates have said or did that were memorable, perhaps for the wrong reasons.
Okay, so this could be a very broad answer, because there are generally very few major faux pas that happen, but once in a while there are some pretty bad faux pas, and you're like, "Wow, that's a big red flag." So I'm not going to go into those because they're not necessarily amusing, and I don't necessarily think that the interviewees or the applicants would actually be happy with us disclosing their faux pas. But just be certain that, if, for example, you're asked a scenario or an ethical question, try not to, for example, give a very unethical answer. I think that's one of these things where I think that's hopefully not groundbreaking news. But I think more humorously, there are a number of situations where, getting back to what Dr. Herman said about actually knowing the program and the place that you're applying to. Some of the more embarrassing things that have happened have revolved around that. So we did have one interview. So we're from Winnipeg in Manitoba. We had an interviewee who actually then referred to us as Edmonton for the whole interview. This was, of course, a virtual interview. So if they were actually in Winnipeg and still called Edmonton, that would be actually really alarming. But this was a virtual interview, so we kind of gave them a bit of slack. But we're like, oh, do they actually know who they're interviewing for? So that was pretty embarrassing. The other thing then are individuals who pretend they know a lot about the city, but really don't. And so I can count the number of times where one of the little blurbs we have in our description of Winnipeg, the city, is our program is something. Oh, the city is like it's a big city with a small town feel. And we were thinking, oh, we should make this a drinking game. Every time someone actually says that exact same line that they have essentially cribbed from our description, I was like, we should just take a drink or something, because it was like, just like, at least do some innovative research and actually learn about our city, as opposed to then saying exactly what's in our program description. And then we had a person who then kept talking about how they were living in, or they were in rural somewhere or the other. And they thought that Winnipeg would be just as, provide the same amount of experience as a rural program. And we were like, I don't think we pride ourselves as a rural program. We pride ourselves actually being able to provide a big city sort of feel. And so we're like, we actually provide some of these things that, they're like, oh, we may have to go away for this rotation, that rotation. Like, no, we actually provide all that stuff in Winnipeg. So it may not be as small of a program as you think it is. And I think the underlying theme there then is to really do your background research into the programs that you're applying to, know them well. Try not to overstretch yourself. So another person kept referring to how well he knew Winnipeg, and he kept quoting the single restaurant that he had eaten at one point in time. We're like, okay, that's cool, but there's more to Winnipeg than just that single restaurant, right? Yeah, so know your program well. Come up with good questions, as opposed to asking, so do you do research at your center? Actually come up with an actual relevant question about research. And the other thing that I would also say is, maybe when you're practicing, watch for certain tics or behaviors that you do repeatedly. So it's non-common that, especially under stress, you will then have certain things that you will do that you may not be aware of. So ones that we liked and we find fun are people who like to use words that they're obviously sort of stress-related words. So we had one candidate recently who loved the word putative. And so when you use the word putative once, we're like, okay, that's kind of an interesting way to use the word. And then they would just keep dropping the word putative repeatedly. And after like the 8th or 9th use of the word putative, we're like, oh, that's really interesting. And so memorable for the wrong reasons. Those are more embarrassing, not faux pas. Would probably not necessarily hold it against you, but at least I would say at least know the program that you're applying to.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So this concludes the formal panel portion of the event. And first of all, we want to thank all our panelists for taking the time to share their thoughts on their questions. Now we will also transition to the smaller group portion, where you can join any table that you would like. We ask that our experts please disperse themselves amongst the different tables so that we have a fair number of experts to guests. And just another reminder that there's a maximum of 6 people per table. However, if any of you guys need to head out, please feel free to, and we want to thank you for joining our event tonight. I know that I can speak on behalf of Omar and myself, where we hope that you learned some great tips and tricks from our panelists. And if you need to head out, good luck on any upcoming interviews that you guys may have.
Good luck, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.